world leaders condemn Brazil violence as U.S. lawmakers call for Bolsonaro extradition. Joe Biden says situation in Brazil is outrageous as presidents across South America denounce assault on democracy. Joe Biden said the situation in Brazil was outrageous after supporters of the former president Jair Bolsonaro invaded the country's Congress, presidential palace and Supreme Court on Sunday, with some senior U.S. lawmakers calling for the far-right figure to be extradited from the U.S. Biden's words of condemnation were echoed by world leaders across the globe, including some of Brazil's closest neighbors. Brazil's president, Luiz CIO Lula da Silva, who defeated Bolsonaro in a closely fought election last year, announced a federal security intervention in Brasília lasting until 31 January after Capitol security forces were overwhelmed initially by the invaders. I condemn the assault on democracy and on the peaceful transfer of power in Brazil. Brazil's democratic institutions have our full support and the will of the Brazilian people must not be undermined, Biden said on Twitter. The U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, tweeted that using violence to attack democratic institutions is always unacceptable, and called for an immediate end to the invasion of Brazil's democratic institutions. The U.S. National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, said the U.S. condemned any effort to undermine democracy in Brazil. President Biden is following the situation closely and our support for Brazil's democratic institutions is unwavering. Brazil's democracy will not be shaken by violence, Sullivan said. Bolsonaro flew out of Brazil on the eve of Lula's inauguration and is in Florida. Many in the USA and across the world saw echoes of the U.S. Capitol invasion of 2021 in the actions of Bolsonaro's supporters and called for the former president to be extradited. Joaquin Castro, a member of the U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee, told CNN that Bolsonaro had used the Trump playbook to inspire domestic terrorists to try and take over the government. Right now Bolsonaro is in Florida. A broken bar. He should be extradited to Brazil. A broken bar. The United States should not be a refuge for this authoritarian who has inspired domestic terrorism in Brazil, he said. The U.S. House Democrat Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said, nearly 2 years to the day the U.S. Capitol was attacked by fascists, we see fascist movements abroad attempt to do the same in Brazil. She called for the U.S. to cease granting refuge to Bolsonaro in Florida. Chile's president, Gabriel Boric, called the storming of Brazil's institutions a cowardly and vile attack on democracy. Colombia's president, Gustavo Petro, said, fascism has decided to stage a coup. A broken bar. It is urgent for the OAS, Organization of American States, to meet if it wants to continue to live as an institution. The Argentinian president, Alberto Fernandez, tweeted that he committed his country's unconditional support for it. Lula official in the face of this attempted coup he is facing. Venezuela's president, Nicolás Maduro, said he rejected the violence generated by Bolsonaro's neo-fascist groups which have assaulted Brazil's democratic institutions. Our support for Lula official and the Brazilian people who will surely mobilize in defense of peace and their president. The UN Secretary-General, Guterres, called Brazil a great democratic country and said he was confident the will of the Brazilian people and the country's institutions would be respected. The European Council President, Charles Michel, said Lula had been democratically elected by millions of Brazilians through fair and free elections, and condemned the assault on the democratic institutions of Brazil. France's Emmanuel Macron said Lula could count on his country's unwavering support and that the will of the Brazilian people and the democratic institutions must be respected. Spain's Prime Minister, Pedro Sánchez, also offered Lula his full support, adding, "We categorically condemn the assault on the Congress of Brazil and call for an immediate return to democratic normality." A similar call came from Italy's far-right Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, who said the scenes from Brazil were incompatible with any form of democratic dissent. Portugal's Foreign Minister, João Gomes Craveno, claimed much of the responsibility rested with Bolsonaro and said it would be very important if he had a message of condemnation in the face of the disorder that is currently happening in Brasilia. The Australian government said it condemns the attack on Brazil's Congress, Supreme Court and Presidential Palace, which a Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade spokesperson said was unacceptable. Democratic institutions and processes must be respected. Human Rights Watch blamed the attack on a years-long campaign by former President Jair Bolsonaro and his allies to undermine democratic principles and spread baseless claims of electoral fraud. The organization released a statement calling the storming an abhorrent attack on Brazil's democratic institutions by people who are seeking to deny the right of Brazilians to vote for and elect the leaders of their choice, including by urging military intervention. A broken bar. We have a small favor to ask. Millions are turning to The Guardian for open, independent, quality news every day, and readers in 180 countries around the world now support us financially. We believe everyone deserves access to information that's grounded in science and truth, and analysis rooted in authority and integrity. That's why we made a different choice, to keep our reporting open for all readers, regardless of where they live or what they can afford to pay. This means more people can be better informed, united, and inspired to take meaningful action. In these perilous times, a truth-seeking global news organization like The Guardian is essential. We have no shareholders or billionaire owner, meaning our journalism is free from commercial and political influence. This makes us different. When it's never been more important, our independence allows us to fearlessly investigate, challenge and expose those in power.